right, so let's continue on with Esther, chapter 2, verse 1. אחר הדברים האלה, כשור חמת המלך אחשוורוש, זכר את ושתי ואת אשר עשתה ואת אשר נגזר עליה. All right. So let's see. So אחר הדברים האלה, after these things, כשור חמת המלך, the anger of the king was quieted. Right? Like it went down, it subsided. The king Ahasuerus. Zachar, concerning, he remembered Vashti, and also that which she had done, and that which nigzar aleha. So this is from gazar. This is a niphal form, so it's going to be probably passive. From gazar, and it means to be like, literally means to be cut off from, right? Gazar is to shut off, and sometimes this can have to do with imprisoning someone. But in this case, the idea is cut off from, meaning the verdict had been decided, something like that, right? So she had been cut down, belittled, is kind of what's happening there. So that which, because he thought about what was done against her, kisoch hamat hamelech, the anger of the king, the heat of the king subsided. Verse 2. ויאמרו נערי המלך, משרותיו, יבקשו למלך נערות בתולות טובות מראה. Then the king's lads, right, the youthful men of the king, suggested, literally they said, the ones who were in service to him, suggested, Yevakashu lamelech, let it be searched for the king, for the sake of the king, ne'arot, young girls, women this means, right, lasses, it's more like the Scottish word lass, lasses, betulot, who are virgins, tovot, who are good, mare, good looking, good of appearance. Verse 3. ויפקד המלך פקידים בכל מדינות מלכותו, ויקבצו את כל נערה ותולה טובת מראה אל שושן הבירה, אל בית הנשים אל יד הגה, סריס המלך, שומר הנשים, ונתון tamruqeihen. And this is something that, by the way, you guys, if you're more used to reading Torah, this doesn't happen so often. Look, we have a etnachta here, and there's another one further up in the verse. Where was it? Oh, I thought I saw two. Maybe not. We'll see as we translate through. Okay, so vayafked amelech. So this is a hiphil form. The yod came down. We have a tsari here. So the king then appointed appointees among all the provinces of his kingdom, that they should gather all of the lass, or really each lass who is a virgin, who is good looking. So not all the virgins got rallied up, only the good looking ones, unto Shushan Habira, like the capital, unto the house of the women who were in the authority of this guy, Hege, the eunuch of the king. In this case, it probably really does mean eunuch. This was unfortunately the practice of many in the ancient Near East. If the king had women being protected or guarded, he wanted the men to be castrated, so presumably they would not do something to the women. Also, castration would make the men stronger. Like if you've ever seen this can happen with animals. Some animals, when they get castrated, like a bull, will get even bigger. Shomer Hanashim, the one who was safeguarder of the women, protector of the women. Venaton tamruqeihen. And so the naton, this is a passive participle of the call, meaning to natan, to give. And this last word, this tamruqeihen, this is from the word tamruk. It's a bit rare. Tamruk, so it's their tamruk. Tamruk is like literally like a smearing. That's what it means, right? So the idea is that these ladies are the ones that are smeared with ointments, with cosmetic lotions. They're going to smell real nice. They're going to feel good about themselves. They're always cleansing and purifying and bathing, etc., etc., etc. So it's something like nice baths with anointings is what's happening to them. They're being treated cosmetically, according to Halot. Okay, verse 4. Actually, let me scroll up. Let's get it. Scroll to the top so it's clear where we are. All right. Verse 4. והנערה אשר תיטב בעיני המלך תמלוך תחת ושתי Vayitav hadavar be'einei hamelech vayas came. Now, and the last, who will be good in the eyes of the king, meaning in his sight, his opinion, she shall reign, timloch, in place of Vashti. Now, the matter was good in the sight of the king, like in his opinion. So it was done such. Verse 5. Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan habira, u'shemo Mordechai, ben Yair, ben Shim'i, ben Kish, ish Yemini. So here's where we usually in the synagogue we'd applaud, right? So some applaud for Ahasuerus also, right? Every time we say the name Ahasuerus, yay, woo! Because even though he's a drunkard and a slob and not really a great guy and refused to rebuild the temple and all that stuff, still he eventually acted on our behalf, right? Though it was his negligence that caused the threat in the first place. But the great hero in the story is, of course, Mordechai. So Ish Yehudi, there was a Jewish man, a man from Judah, in Shushan Habira, and his name was Mordechai, son of Yair, son of Shim'i, son of Kish, Ish Yamini. So this says Ish Yamini. This can mean actually a couple of things. So we say that he's Yehudi, so he might be from the tribe of Judah or just from the territory of Judah. All right? And when we say Ish Yamini, this is the Bible sometimes expresses Benjamites. Instead of saying Benyamini, as we would expect, oftentimes they'll just say Yamini. So this guy's kind of a double meaning. It could be saying he's a righteous man, right? Or he's a Benjamite, one of those two. Verse 6. Asher hogla mirushalayim im hagola asher hoglata im Yechonya melech Yehuda, who was deported from Jerusalem with the deportation which deported with Yechonya, king of Judah, Asher hegla Nebuchadnezzar melech Babel, whom had deported Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Verse 7. Actually, let me scroll. I like to scroll it to the top. Vahi omein et Hadassah hi Esther bat dodo ki ein lah av va'ein v'hana'ara yefat to'ar v'tovat marei uv'mot aviha ve'imah lekacha Mordechai lo levat. Now there was Omein. So Omein, this is not the way the Ashkenazi say Amen. You hear Ashkenazi say Omein. Okay? So what it's saying is that Mordechai, he was Omein. This means he was someone who watched out for children, right? Like a guardian today. He had become a parent, right? The feminine of this, Omein, it means a nurse, right? So to kind of give you the idea of what it's saying in Hebrew, he's like a male nurse, right? He like kind of like a male yaya, right? He looked after her. He cared about her. So he looked after the woman named Hadassah. This is her Hebrew name, Hadassah. We say Hadassah. It's marked here in the Hebrew. It's hard for me to read it this way because we always say Hadassah from the Ashkenazi Yiddish pronunciation. Her name's actually Hadassah, right? You can see the accent mark here, the Revi marked on top of it. So Hadassah, really her name, but we say Hadassah. She is, and implied is known as Esther. So here's her Babylonian name, but her Hebrew name is Hadassah. And this happens to this day. If you're not Jewish, it might be interesting to know that Jews in the diaspora, we have our English name and then we have our Hebrew name, right? So for example, like my English name is Jeremiah, but my Hebrew name is Yirmiyahu, right? So in the synagogue, I'm not called by my last name. I'm called Yirmiyahu ben Avraham. Pardon me, ben Avram. Messed up my own name. Jeremiah, son of Avram, right? So you're called by your father's name, right? If you're a man. So that's that. Okay. So anyway, so this is something similar that happened for her. And oftentimes a Jewish guy's name might be like Fred or John, and then he's got the name like Moshe in the synagogue, right? It can be very different. It's not always similar like that one is. Okay. Let's continue reading. Oh, okay. So where were we? He was, but, okay. So she is Esther, the daughter of her dod, her uncle. For this reason, for she had not, Ein-la, she didn't have a father or a mother, right? She's an orphan. And the last was beautiful in appearance, and she's a beautiful, it's kind of hard to translate, because Yafat Toar means like beautiful of looking, the Tovat Marei, and good Marei of appearance, right? You can see they're both very similar, right? We have a similar situation here, right? So maybe like formed, good formed, or, something like that. Okay? Uvemot aviha, the imah, for her father and her mother had mot, they had died. Or rather, when they died, this is when they died, the participle, lakacha Mordechai, Mordechai took her for himself to be a daughter. Right, so very good relative here. Okay, and I want to pause for a second. I need to pause. All right, continuing on. Let's my window got shifted. Let me scroll up to verse 8. ויהי בהישמע דבר המלך ודעתו ובהיקבץ נערות רבות אל שושן הבירה אל יד הגי. ותילקח אסתר אל בית המלך אל יד הגי שומר הנשים. So when it came to pass that when the edict of the king, when the word of the king was heard, this is niphal, it's hard to recognize that it's niphal, but it is, you see the dagesh there, and his ordinance, that, again, niphal, see the dagesh, that should be collected, lasses, many lasses, unto Shushan Abira, by the authority of Haggai, that Esther was taken, right? So you have niphal, there's the dagesh in the first root letter, so it would have been vatin lakach, it's vatilakach. Esther was taken unto the house of the king by the authority of Haggai, shomer hanashim, the watchman of the women. Verse 9. ותיטב הנערה ועיניו, ותישא חסד לפניו, ויבהל את תמרוקיה, ואת מנותיה, לתת לה, ואת שבע הנערות הורות לתת לה מבית המלך, וישגנה ואת נערותיה, לטוב בית hanashim. The cursor is kind of dragging behind for some reason. I don't know if the computer's working on something, but it's dragging behind, so I'm having to adjust my reading for it to catch up. It's kind of awkward feeling. So vatitav lahanarea ve'enaiv. This means, and she was good. The lass was good in the eyes, in the sight, in his sight, meaning of Haggai's sight. So she brought chesed, like kindness. Favor, really, is kind of the nuance of it here, before him. So that he bahel tamruqeihen. So that tamruqeihen, again, that is the those special, it's like cosmetic treatment, like with washes and oils and lotions and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's like saying he treated her with all these things. And this one, it's hard to see. It's actually in the Piel, this habahel. If you look, hold on, I lost my place where okay. Notice the hay can't take a dagesh, but we still have the tsari under there, right? So we still have this marking we'd expect in the Piel. And the Piel of Bahal means to hurry up, to act really quickly, to do something quickly. So he rushed with this whole process of cosmetics and manoteha and her gifts to give to her. And the 7 lasses who were seen to give to her, right? So the ones that were allowed to always be seen because they're so good looking, from the house of the king. Vaishaneha ve'et naoteha latov beit hanashim. So this vashaneha, notice the dagesh in the noon there. So we have another PL form of the verb here. Now, shana, it can mean to change. It's used with respect to King David when it says that he disguised himself, right? So she's not really disguising herself, but you got to be careful with this word. It can mean to pervert. There's really a lot of things. It means change one's clothes, to transfer. In this case, it's probably to transfer if we look at the context. So if we follow along, we say that she was transferred. They transferred her and her lasses, right? Those 7 lasses who were caring for her, making her beautiful all the time, for goodness, to the house of ladies, house of the women. Okay, let me scroll up to verse 10. Sorry, this is kind of haphazard. This was kind of a last minute thought to do this, so there's no planning or anything involved. We're just doing this randomly. Verse 10. Lo higida Esther et amah ve'et moladta ki Mordechai tziva aleha asher lo tagid. But Esther did not tell about, this is from Nagi, this is where we get the word for haggadah, the Passover, haggadah, the retelling. So Esther did not tell about her Ammah, her people, or nor her moladta, her. So moledet can mean like homeland, like meaning Israel, right, Judah, or it can actually mean your close kin, right, your family. For Mordechai had commanded on her, like he commanded upon her literally, that concerning she should not tell, lo tagid. Verse 11, and my pointer is slow. Sorry if it's not going exactly where I'm reading. I'm trying to, maybe I'll try to read slower so I can adjust. Uvechol yom vayom Mordechai mithalech lifnei hatzar beit hanashim lada'at et shlom Ester uma ya'ase bah. Yeah, it's still dragging behind. I don't know why that's happening. Sorry about that. Now, in each day of the day, and day, right? So all the day, all the time, Mordechai mithalech, he paced. He was pacing. He's walking to and fro before the Chatzar Beit Hanashim. This is Chatzer, but in the construct. So the Munach gives us a hint that it's construct plus the vowels change. So the courtyard of the house of the women. L'da'at, in order to know Shalom Esther, that's how she was doing, right? How's her Shalom? How's she doing? Uma Ya'ase, and what was being done. This is a niphal. Notice the ayin can't take the dagesh, but we have a lengthening from chirik to tseri here. Ya'ase, what was being done. Ba. Notice it's not what will be done, right? So again, throw away that idea that imperfect is always future in Hebrew. That is a modern Hebrew thing. In biblical Hebrew, this is more a continuing thing. So what is being done to her? What was being done to her? Okay. Verse 12. ובהגיע תור נערה ונערה לבוא אל המלך אחשוורוש מקץ היות לה כדת הנשים 12 חודש כי כן ימלאו ימי תמרוקיהן 6 חודשים בשמן חמור ו6 חודשים בבשמים ובתמרוקה, pardon me, ובתמרוקי הנשים. It's foreign words, kind of weird sounding. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. This, I think, is probably where Islam gets the idea. You can kind of see this far eastern idea that for a woman to be really beautiful, you got to treat her skin for many, many days. So, for example, there's I think it's in the authentic hadith. It might not be in Quran itself, but maybe it's in Quran. Someone can comment and let me know if you're familiar with Islam. So in the Islamic teachings, the authentic Islamic teachings, there are certain women that will be given to Muslim men, and these women, the khuri, they will be, which is funny because that means frost, like frost in Hebrew, but anyway, the khuri, they will be scrubbed by Allah. Their skin will be scrubbed for 1,000 years to make them super smooth, right? So I guess the idea is he couldn't just do it in a day. He's a lesser god. It takes him 1,000 years to do it. So, but you can see a similar thing here. Look at all this time that this is happening to Esther. All this time she's having all these things done to her, right? Preparing her, supposedly making her at her best. Maybe they're feeding her well too, so her eyes will look healthy like they should look, and all these sorts of things. So here we have, the Hebrew says, ובהגיע. So this is from the verb naga. So this can kind of be strange. So naga can mean to touch, literally to touch. But usually in the Torah, this is with negative consequences, like to touch with a disease, to afflict. It's almost like to smite, but with some kind of supernatural punishment. But this is in the hiphil. This particular one is in the hiphil. So it's a little bit different, meaning this is a hiphil infinitive construct. So that, you guys remember, that's like the wild card. It can mean all kinds of things when it's infinitive construct. And so this is really saying something that the higia tur, that it became Esther's turn, right? Or it happened, or it was the occasion. So it's kind of like she's being causing to be touched by time, the tur of Esther, right? Like her turn. So uvehagia tur. So it was the turn or the time caused to touch. Na'ara. Okay? Na'ara, last v'na'ara, and last, lavo, to come el hamelech. So, like all the other lasses had to come to the king, also it was now her turn, the king Ahasuerus. Miketz heyot la kedat hanashim. From the end, it happened to her according to the command of the women. So we're told here by the text that she's not volunteering like to be a whore or something. She's being forced to. It's kedat, right, according to the order, the ruling rather, right? The dot, the order, the ruling of the women. Shnei masar chodesh, 12 months. Ki ken yimelu yemei tmrukihen, For then it was such that were filled the days of their, it's again hard to bring this word in English, they're being rubbed with oils and stuff, being bathed and rubbed with, lotions and oils and all that stuff, cosmetics. Maybe cosmetification, right? If there's such a word. Their cosmetification. Please drop in the comments if you know a better English word for this. I might just be lacking. Shisha chodeshim, 6 months, beshemen, with oil. Hamur, okay, mur is myrrh, what we call myrrh in English. Veshisha chodeshim, and 6 months, bisamim, with spices. Uvit tamruqeihen hanashim, and with the cosmetifications of women. And I need to pause because I'm being summoned to dinner. Okay, sorry about that. I was summoned away for dinner. So, all right, let me scroll up to where we are now. This should be, I think we're on 13, right? Okay, good. Make my screen a bit brighter so I can see it easier. All right. ובזה הנערה באה אל המלך. את כל אשר תאמר יינתן לה לבוא עמה מבית הנשים עד בית המלך. And by means of this is what we'd call an accusative of means, the way that it's positioned before the verb. See, here we have ba'ah. Hebrew syntax a lot of times is determined by word order. So since the verb usually comes first, if you move something like this in front of the verb, it either has emphasis, or in this case it is an emphasizing element, but it means it's like an instrumental case we would have in other languages, right? So uvazeh, so by means of this, hana'ara, the lass came el hamelech, came to the king. Et kol asher tomar yinaten la. And then now we have some more emphasis here. Here we have the eight, right? And here's the verb yinaten, which is niphal of natan. See the dagesh, which was given. So it's telling us everything which she said, she requested, was given la to her. Lavo, so that she might go, ima, with her, mi beit hanashim, it might go with her, from the house of the women, ad beit hamelech, unto the house of the king. Verse 14. Ha'arev hi ba'al, va'boker hi shava el beit hanashim, sheni el yad sha'ash zar. These weird Persian names. Saris hamelech, shomer ha'pilagshim, lo tavo od el hamelech, ki im chafetz ba hamelech v'nika'ah v'shem. Okay. In that evening, and in the morning, she herself came. Okay, so literally sorry, it's not she, it's that. That's a demonstrative pronoun. It means she, but it's a demonstrative pronoun. So in that evening, she came, or she arrived, and in the morning, this time it actually is she. She shava el beit hanashim. She returned unto the house of the women. Sheni el yad sha'ash gar. Sha'ash gar. You gotta love these Persian names. Sometimes it's just really quite a mouthful, especially if you're not too used to them. Right? So, sha'ash gar. All right. Okay, where were we? Lost my place. So a second time, by the authority of sha'ash gars. So she's returned into authority. The eunuch of the king, who safeguarded, who protected the concubines. Lo tavo od, that one would not come anymore, el hamelech, unto the king, ki im. So this is kind of syntactically difficult. It means like unless if chafetz ba, he delighted in her, the king delighted in her, then, the vav here is probably like then, because it's related to the ki im. See, ki im, we come over here to vav, so it's like an if-then sort of thing happening here. So unless he delighted in her, the king delighted in her, then nikra v'shem, she would be called by name, v'shem, see, by name. So he would actually call her back by her actual name. So this king, after he slept with her, he decided it's important to remember her name if he liked her. All right, verse 5. ובהגיע תור אסתר בת אביחיל, דוד מרדכי, אשר לקח לו לבת לבוא אל המלך, לא ביקשה דבר כי אם את אשר יאמר הגיא, סריס המלך, שומר הנשים, ותהי אסתר נושאת חן בעיני כל רואיה. So, again, this is that weird expression. The tul is like the turn, right? This is related from the Hebrew word tul. So you have like a shurik in the middle. Like, we use this for spy language, like to scout around the land, right? To go around the land. In modern Hebrew, it means like to tour. Tul in Hebrew means to tour, right? Like to tour around, to go all around. But in this case, this to, this is derived word, it has to do with like your turn. It's like a turn, right? So the turn of Esther, so ובהגיע, the bait means when. So now, when it was Esther's turn, so literally the turn of Esther touched her, is what it's saying. Esther, the daughter of Avichail, whose uncle was Mordechai, whom he had taken for himself to be a daughter, to bring unto the king. So this is kind of a mouthful. It's all saying her turn. Lo viksha davar. She did not request a thing. So she's trusting in the wisdom of this guy. So, except that which Haggai, the eunuch of the king, said to her. So, sorry, this corresponding annotation ESV keeps popping up. That means this was highlighted over there at some point in time, probably years back. This eunuch of the king, who shomer, who safeguarded the women, and whom Esther, then Esther would carry forth favor in the eyes of everyone who saw her, right? So she's letting him recommend what to do, and it's working very well because everything she's requesting, everything he tells her to do, she does, which is a great teaching on how we should respect the experts in your lives. If God puts someone who's a teacher, an expert in your life, then by all means, even if you don't like the person, if it's a workplace or something, if you know they're an expert, then learn from them in that thing. As we're taught in Mishnah Avot, the wise man learns something from everyone. All right, so continuing on, chapter 2, verse 16. ותלקח אסתר אל המלך אחשוורוש אל בית מלכותו בחודש השביעי הוא חודש טבת בשנת שבע למלכותו. So then Esther was taken. Notice it's tilakach. See the dagesh in there? That tells us it's niphal, right? So when Esther was taken unto the king Ahasuerus, unto the house of his, it really says his kingdom. It happened during the month, the 10th month, the ha'ishiri, so that's 10th. So the month, the 10th one, that one is the month known as, it doesn't say known as, but I'm making it sound better in English, Tevet. Right? So it's Tevet. I said Tevet by accident because the Tav used to not have a sound except TH. Bishnat Shiva, in the 7th year, the Malchuto of his reign. So oftentimes in ancient Near Eastern stuff, the year was established, the calendar is established by kings. We see this especially in Egypt, which makes Egyptian timing very difficult because you have so many kings. So it's kind of like, in the West we have AD and BC, or Jewish scholars like to say BCE, right, and CE, Common Era, before the Common Era. Well, they had like hundreds of these in Egypt. Each era is the era of a king, sometimes just lasting a few years, right? So it's very difficult to date things in their system. Okay, verse 17. ויאהב המלך את אסתר מכל הנשים ותישא חן וחסד לפניו מכל הבתולות. וישם כתר מלכות בראשה, וימליכיה תחת Vashti. This is good news. So then the king loved Esther more. So we say from in Hebrew, from all the women. That means more than all the women. So that he lifted up favor and loving kindness before him from all, meaning more than all of the virgins. Those who previously were virgins. That's what it means. He made them not virgins anymore. And he gave, Vayasim, it could be set or gave, a keter malchut berosha, a queen's crown, or a crown of the kingdom upon her rosh, upon her head. Vayamlichaiha, and he coronated her tachet Vashti, in place of Vashti. Verse 18. ויעש המלך משתה גדול לכל שריו, ועבדיו את משתה אסתר. וחנכה למדינות עשה, וייתן מסית כיד המלך. So the king made a drinking feast, a great drinking feast, משתה גדול, for all of his, it's like princes, right, or something like that. By the way, this is where we get the Russian word Tsar. The Tsar in Russian, the king of Russia, it comes from the Hebrew word Tsar. It came from Hebrew up in that way, so it's kind of interesting. And they actually have one Russian letter, the sheen here. The sheen, not a seen, but if the on the other side, this exists, like this one. This exists in Russian. It's a she, also sound. So they took a lot from Greek and a little bit from Hebrew. So Va'avadav and his servants at Mishtei Ester, the feast of Esther, it was called. V'chanacha lamidinot asa. Okay, so hanacha, this is a bit interesting. So the root of this word, hanacha, this is actually what we would call a releasing, right? Like causing to rest. right? From Noach. It's related to Noach, the man Noach, or Manoach is also resting, right? So, or like we talk about Mei Menuchot in the Psalm 23, the still waters, tranquil waters. So it's related all to this root. So he caused a rest. What this means is he loosened the taxes. There's no taxes for this period. To the Medinas, and yes, someone asked me the other day, is this where the Arabic name for the city of Medina comes from? Yes, it does. The idea was that it was a great city in those days compared to the other cities, so they called it Medina. It's a cognate in Arabic. So in this case, the provinces did likewise. He did so. Vayiten maset kiyad hamelech. So, and he gave a maset. Maset. So if you look at that, you can probably guess what the root of maset is there. Maset, it's talking about usually like tribute or gift, or it can be work, something which is done, or it can be an offering, or like something that's given, like an honorific portion or something like that. So it is he's giving back something to them. It's like it's considered a gift, right? By giving this offering back, by giving this tribute or a present back, he's making everybody happy, right? They're joyous. He's making everybody richer, right? So for to the Medinas he made and he gave it's considered like a gift, right? Like an offering from Asa, something that's done or made by the authority of the king, right? Literally by the hand of the king. Okay, let me just scroll up to verse 19. All right. Verse 19 says, "Uvehi kavetz betulot shenit, uMordechai yoshe b'sha'ar hamelech." Right, so now, when virgins were gathered, shenit, a second time, and Mordecai was sitting at the gate of the king, right? So he's like monitoring very closely what's happening. Verse 20, Ein Esther magyedet moladtah ve'et amah ka'asher tziva aleha Mordechai ve'et ma'amar Mordechai Esther osa ka'asher hoitab ve'omna ito. She's a good girl. So there was not from Esther a magyedet. So this word magyedet, this actually is from nagad, right? So again, remember we said nagad is like where you get the haggadah from, haggadah. So the passover haggadah comes from God. So this is a hiphil participle. So when we say Esther she did not cause to tell, right? So nobody was able to make her tell, but she did not tell about moladta, about her relative, right? Or it could mean the land in which she hailed from, i.e. Judah. Ve'ama, or about her people, according to how Mordechai had commanded aleha, upon her. Vet mamar, in the promise of Mordechai, Esther did, like she kept it, according to how she was in omna ito with her. So omna is like truth, right, or veritas. Okay, and then we have the interesting samach here. This will be the end of a section, but we'll keep going to the pay end of the section, right? So this is the satum, very satuma, closed section there. Verse 21, בימים ההם ומרדכי יושב בשער המלך, קצף בגתן ותרש, שני סריסי המלך, משומרי הסף, ויבקשו לשלוח יד במלך אחשוורוש. So in those days, it's interesting, we have Mordechai, like en Mordechai. This is probably what we would call a vav emphaticum, right? So it's probably more like an exclamation point, right? It's strengthening what's being said. That's why I kind of raised my voice when I was reading. So in those days, Mordecai was sitting at the gate of the king, and katzaf bigdat vater. So these guys, Bigthan and Teresh, they were katzaf, they were angry, right? They became angry. And we get this, okay, I'm sorry, the full subject is their names, and then Shnei Sarisei HaMelech, two of the eunuchs of the king, or officials of the king, those who were protecting Ha-Saf. Saf is like where the grain would be stored, this kind of stuff. So that they sought to send out a hand against the king, Ahasuerus. So this is, of course, an idiom, meaning they wanted to harm him. Okay, let's scroll up to verse 20. We're almost done with chapter 2. Oh, wait, 20 we're on, right? 20? 21. Wait. Oh yeah, 22, sorry, 22. Okay? 22. ויוודע הדבר למרדכי, ויגד לאסתר המלכה, ותאמר אסתר למלך בשם מרדכי. So this vayivada, this is a niphal form of yada, right? So it became known, or was made known, the matter to Mordechai. Now we have our own tradition, Jewish tradition on this. The tradition was that Mordechai was a very bright man, and he knew many languages. And this, of course, is wise. You can endear to people when you speak the language, right? Or even if you just say a few words in the language, they like it. How much more so if they themselves have been deported from another land? So the Midrash tells us that these two sarisim, these two officials or eunuchs, however you decide to interpret it, probably officials, I think here, they spoke a rare language. They were from a rare land. I can't remember what the land was, but so that they thought nobody would understand them. So they were talking in their language to each other about the conspiracy, about, in Hebrew, the kesher. Kesher is a conspiracy, like a binding, right? People bind themselves against the king or whatever. And Mordechai knew their language. He knew their language. And so he understood what they were saying. At least that's our tradition, right? And so it being made known to him, it was made known because he knew what they were saying. And so this is kind of an example of how it's very foolish. I remember I had a friend at university who was a fellow who had immigrated to the United States from Russia because he had been, he got the right to immigrate because he was not Jewish, but he was a freedom fighter for democracy. So he knew Boris Yeltsin, and Yeltsin used to send him with newspapers of the truth to the Baltic states, and he'd carry back information back and forth and help decimate true media, because the media, of course, was controlled, as it is today in Russia, it was controlled in those days as well, right, in the Soviet Union. So the people couldn't know the truth, so he would help decimate stuff. So he was a political dissident. When Boris Yeltsin was kicked out, this is my friend Yuri Chikalin, if you're out there anywhere. Я помню тебя, друг. Друзья, друг мой, пиши меня. So he would actually, so they were pals, right? And when Boris Yeltsin got kicked out of the Communist Party, Yuri was there to greet him and congratulate him, and they had a tea together at a coffee shop. So anyway, so he ended up getting to come to America because he was a political dissident, right? It was dangerous for him. So and he told me one time he was in the subway in Boston, and there were these girls talking in Russian about him, saying, "Oh, look how good looking he is," and blah blah blah, all that stuff. Which is funny because Yuri looks like as Russian as they get. So it's kind of funny to me that they thought he wasn't Russian. And so when he's about to get off the car, or they're getting off, I don't remember, he just told them, "Spasiba, thanks." They blushed. So never assume that people don't understand your language. Oh, I'm sorry for the story time, but one more story. My rabbi, my bar mitzvah rabbi, he knows Yiddish, and he told me one time his father in Rhode Island, they had a store, a hardware store, right? And one day, a black fellow came in, and the black fellow was a little bit inebriated. He was drunk. And so my rabbi, he's just a boy at the time, and so he tells his father, look out, basically, he's verschnicked, right? He's drunk. And the black fellow starts talking to him in Yiddish. He says, "I'm not drunk." So he knew Yiddish. So their stereotype, he learned from that never to stereotype or assume that people don't know a language. The guy was fluent in Yiddish, and they had a nice laugh about it later, so... Turned out his father was a Kohen and stuff like this, so he was a Jewish guy. Okay, so continuing on. The Mordechai, so the thing was made known to Mordechai. Vayaged Esther, and he told it to Esther, Hamalka, the queen. Valtomer Esther Lamelech, and Esther told it to the king, Beshem Mordechai, in the name of Mordechai. And finally, finishing up chapter 2, verse 23. Vayvukash davar vayimatzeh vayit'alu shnehem al eitz. Vayikateh b'sefer divrei hayamim lifnei hamelech. So the thing was sought, it was investigated, the matter was investigated, and it was found so that the two of them were hung upon a tree. Then it was written down in the book or the scroll of the words of the king, or the annals of the king. This is the same language we get for the chronicles in Hebrew. So the chronicles of the king, in the presence of the king. So they wrote it down. Okay, that's the end of chapter 2. Let's see how far I can go before I get too tired on this. But we're still in Purim, so hopefully you guys can benefit from this and we can all have a good time together. Again, my apology if it's not too formed so nicely. It's just, we're just doing this on the fly.